For over 1,000 years, human beings dedicated their greatest ingenuity, not to building cities, not to curing disease, but to answering one single question. How much pain can a person endure before they break? The answers they came up with were unspeakable. Some devices crushed bones so slowly you could count every crack. Others cooked people alive from the inside out. And the most disturbing part? People pulled up chairs and watched like it was entertainment. These are the 20 most horrific torture devices ever created. And by the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why history still hasn't forgiven it. Number 20, the thumb screw. We start small, deceptively small. This thing could fit in your coat pocket. You'd barely notice it. But the thumb screw reduced hardened soldiers, battle-scarred men who had faced death, to sobbing wrecks in under a minute. The design was almost insultingly simple. 2 flat metal plates, a screw on top. Your thumbs go in between. Then someone starts turning. With every rotation, the plates close tighter. First comes pressure, then a deep, nauseating ache. Then, crack. The first bone snaps. Then another. Then another. One by one, every small bone in your fingers shattering like dry wood. Guards at the Tower of London carried these casually, like a tool of the trade. They loved it for one particular reason. It left almost no marks. Officials could look a prisoner in the eye and claim they'd never been touched. That combination, maximum pain, minimum evidence, made the thumbscrew one of the most used torture devices in medieval Europe. And this was the warm-up. Number 19. The tongue terror. Say the wrong thing in the wrong century, and they had a device built specifically for your mouth. The tongue terror was exactly what it sounds like. A heavy, rough pair of metal scissors engineered to grip the tongue and rip it out at the root. One hard pull. Gone. The blood loss was catastrophic. Most victims died within days from infection. The ones who survived faced a life where they could never speak again, could barely eat, could barely swallow. The message was brutal in its simplicity. You talk too much, so we took your words. Forever. Number 18. The boot. They called it the Spanish boot. And if the name sounds almost civilized, nothing about what it did was. Your lower leg gets placed between 2 heavy boards, wood or iron, depending on where you were unlucky enough to be tortured. Then the executioner picks up a hammer and starts driving wedges between the boards. 1 swing, 2 swings, 3. Each wedge drives deeper, compressing the muscle, splintering the bone, turning everything below your knee into biological rubble. Popular in Scotland and France during the 1500s and 1600s, some versions went even further, pouring boiling oil into the boot while it was still strapped to your leg. Nobody who experienced the boot ever walked again. That was the entire point. Even if they set you free, you'd carry the punishment for the rest of your life, limping through every single day as a living reminder. Number 17. Coffin torture. Here's where it stops being about just the body and starts attacking your mind. The victim was locked inside a tight iron cage, shaped roughly like a human being, and then hung from a tree or public post. The cage was so narrow you couldn't move your arms, couldn't turn your head, couldn't do anything except exist inside your own private metal prison. Then came the waiting. Blistering sun during the day, bone-deep cold through the night, birds landing on you, picking at exposed skin, crowds below throwing rocks and rotting food for sport. This was the punishment for insulting the king, speaking against the church. The whole town came to watch. Death arrived slowly, sometimes days, sometimes weeks. And even after it did, the body stayed hanging, rotting in the open air, as a warning to everyone passing by. And somehow, compared to what's coming next, This almost seems gentle. Number 16. The Heretic's Fork. Imagine a metal bar, sharp prongs on both ends, one end pressed up under your chin, the other digging into your chest, a leather strap holding the whole arrangement tight around your neck. Now try to fall asleep. The moment your chin dropped from exhaustion, even for a single second, both sets of prongs drove deeper into your flesh. You couldn't speak. You couldn't sleep. You could only sit there, perfectly still, fighting your own body's desperate need for rest. The Spanish Inquisition used the heretic's fork on anyone accused of opposing the church. Victims wore it for days straight. No sleep. Constant stabbing pain. Their minds unraveling hour by hour until they would confess to absolutely anything just to make it stop. And this was just one toy in the Inquisition's collection. Number 9. The Pear of Anguish. This one went inside the body, a pear-shaped metal device inserted into the mouth or other openings, with a screw mechanism at the top. As the torturer turned the screw, 4 sharp metal leaves began to spread apart, expanding inside the body, tearing through tissue from the inside out. The torturer controlled the pace. They could open it a fraction of a millimeter at a time, pausing to ask questions, reading the victim's face, choosing exactly how much further to push. Used against those accused of lying, witchcraft, or homosexuality, the Pear of Anguish turned the human body into the instrument of its own destruction. Number 8. The Iron Maiden. You know the name. You might think you know the device. You don't. Not really. A tall iron cabinet shaped like a human being. The inside lined with dozens of long, sharp spikes, positioned with surgical precision to pierce the body in the most painful places without hitting the heart or major organs. The door closes slowly. The spikes enter. And then, darkness. Complete, absolute darkness. You're standing upright inside a metal coffin, bleeding from a dozen wounds, unable to move, unable to call for help, with no idea how long you'll be left there. The most famous version, the Iron Maiden of Nuremberg, may actually have been constructed in the 1800s as a museum piece rather than a genuine medieval instrument. But the legend predates the reality, and the fear it's generated has never needed a fact check. Number 7. The Scavenger's Daughter. Every other device on this list pulled the body apart. This one did the opposite. A heavy iron hoop with a hinge in the center. The victim was forced into a tight crouch. The hoop was locked around them and then tightened, slowly compressing the body inward, folding it against itself. Ribs snapped. Organs compressed until they ruptured. The pressure built so intensely that blood began pouring from the nose and ears, not from any wound, but from the sheer crushing force on the body's interior. Invented in the 1500s by a man named Skevington, a warden at the Tower of London. They named it after him initially. Then someone came up with something that felt more fitting: the Scavenger's Daughter. Number 6. Rat torture. No metal, no machinery, no engineering required whatsoever. Just one very desperate rat. The victim was tied flat on their back. A live rat was placed on their bare stomach. A metal bucket was placed over the rat, trapping it against the skin. Then someone lit a fire on top of the bucket. As the metal heated up, the rat's entire world became unbearable, frantic, terrified. And there was only one direction it could go: down, through skin, through muscle, through organs. The animal clawing and biting its way through the stomach, trying to escape the heat, tunneling through a living human being. The whole ordeal could last over an hour. The victim was conscious for all of it. They could feel it moving. Used across Europe and Asia for centuries, rat torture's most devastating weapon wasn't the pain. It was the knowing. The moment the bucket went on, the victim understood exactly what was coming, and there was nothing they could do. Number 5. The rack. The rack arrived at the Tower of London in 1420. A flat wooden frame with rollers at each end, wrists tied to one, ankles to the other. The torturer begins to crank. The rollers pull in opposite directions. Your joints stretch beyond their limits and pop from their sockets. Muscles tear. Tendons snap. And if the torturer kept cranking, kept turning that handle with slow, deliberate purpose, arms and legs were separated from the body entirely. One of its most famous victims was Anne Askew, a Protestant writer and one of the bravest people in this entire story. Tortured in 1546, she refused, no matter what they did to her, to give up the names of fellow believers. The rack destroyed her body so completely that she couldn't walk. Guards had to carry her to her own execution. She never gave a single name. Number 4. The Judas Cradle. A tall wooden frame. At the top, a sharp wooden pyramid, like a seat carved into a point. The victim was suspended above it with ropes, then slowly lowered. The pyramid pressed into the most sensitive regions of the body. Their own weight did the rest. The torturer controlled the ropes, raising the victim slightly to offer a cruel pause, then releasing them back down. Hours, sometimes days. But there was one detail that separated the Judas Cradle from everything else on this list. The device was never cleaned between victims. The bacteria, the filth, the biological remnants of every person who came before, all of it waiting on that wooden point. Infection was nearly inevitable. Most people who survived the torture itself died days later from what they couldn't see. And unlike most devices that offered the mercy of darkness or blindfolds, the Judas Cradle offered nothing. You could see everything happening to your own body. Number 15. The Knee Splitter. 2 wooden blocks covered in sharp iron spikes, one on each side of your knee, connected by a large screw. The torturer begins to turn. The spikes bite in. The kneecap gets crushed from both sides simultaneously. The joint, one of the most complex structures in the human body, is systematically destroyed. But here's what made the knee splitter truly sinister. It was almost never used alone. Torturers in Germany, Spain, and Italy during the Middle Ages used it as an opening move. Knees first, then elbows, then ankles. They weren't trying to kill you quickly. They were dismantling you, piece by piece, taking total control through pain that never stopped, never relented, never gave you a single moment to breathe. Number 14. The Iron Chair. At first glance, it's just a chair. Heavy, iron, imposing. Then you look closer. Every single surface is covered in hundreds of small, sharp spikes. The back, the armrests, the seat. Everywhere your body would naturally rest. Waiting. Leather straps lock you in place. You can't stand. You can't shift. You can only sit there while every spike finds its purpose. And here's the detail that makes this device particularly cruel. The spikes were deliberately designed to miss major blood vessels. You weren't meant to bleed out quickly. You were meant to bleed slowly, for hours, sometimes an entire day. Some torturers lit fires beneath the chair, heating the iron, layering burns on top of puncture wounds on top of psychological devastation. Most prisoners broke before they even sat down. Just seeing the iron chair waiting in the corner of the room was enough. Number 13. The Strappado. No elaborate machinery required. No specially designed metal. Just a rope, and something high enough to tie it to. The victim's hands were bound behind their back. Then they were hoisted into the air by their wrists, their entire body weight suspended from their shoulder joints. Within minutes, both shoulders dislocated with a crack loud enough to echo off stone walls. But they didn't stop there. Heavy weights got tied to the ankles, pulling the body downward, multiplying the damage, multiplying the agony. The Inquisition loved the strappado because it required nothing. No equipment to transport, no setup. They could use it anywhere, anytime. Survivors walked away, if walking was even possible, with arms that hung dead at their sides. Useless. For life. And because it left no cuts, no burns, no visible wounds. Officials could stand in court and swear, hand on Bible, that they had never laid a finger on you. Number 12. The Spanish donkey. A long wooden board. The top edge sharpened down to a blade-like ridge. The victim was stripped and forced to straddle that ridge, one leg hanging on each side. Then heavy weights were tied to both ankles. Their own body weight combined with the added load slowly drove that sharp edge upward into the most vulnerable parts of their body. Some victims split apart over the course of several hours. It appeared in Spain during the Inquisition and resurfaced during the American Civil War, where soldiers used it to punish deserters. Centuries apart. Different uniforms. Same unspeakable cruelty. Number 11. The breast ripper. This device was designed specifically to target women, and the name leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. A heavy metal claw, frequently heated until it glowed red, was clamped onto a woman's chest. Then, with a single violent pull, the flesh was torn away. Women accused of infidelity, of ending pregnancies, of speaking against the church. They faced this across medieval Europe. Sometimes called the Iron Spider, it was used as both torture and public humiliation. The victim would be dragged through the streets afterward, bleeding, barely conscious, while crowds gathered to watch. The ones who didn't die immediately. Infection and blood loss finished the job within days. Number 10. The head crusher. A metal cap over the crown of your skull, a metal bar beneath your chin, a screw connecting the two. The torturer begins to turn. First, the teeth crack, splintering like old porcelain under too much pressure. Then the jaw fractures. Then the bones around your eye sockets collapse inward. And then your eyes, forced from their sockets entirely. If the torturer kept going, the skull itself gave way. The brain, crushed. Used throughout the Inquisition and across medieval Europe, the head crusher was considered remarkably efficient at extracting confessions. Even if they stopped before the killing blow, the damage was total and permanent. A face that could never be put back together. Number 3. Impalement. You know the name Dracula. You know the legend. The real man behind it was Vlad III of Wallachia, and he earned the title Vlad the Impaler, the only way a title like that gets earned. A long, sharpened wooden stake driven through the body from below, pushed slowly upward until it emerged from the chest, the shoulder, sometimes the mouth. And the truly monstrous part. Skilled executioners could navigate around major organs on purpose, keeping the victim alive on the stake for up to 3 days. 3 days. Suspended in the air, slowly dying, in full view of everyone. Historical records claim that Vlad once impaled 20,000 Ottoman soldiers and left all of their bodies standing on stakes outside his capital city. When the Ottoman army arrived and saw that vast, silent forest of the dead stretching out before them, they turned around and went home. Impalement was practiced across Turkey, Asia, and parts of Africa well into the 1800s. More than 1,000 years of one of the worst deaths ever conceived. Number 2. The breaking wheel, also known as the Catherine wheel. And this was the longest, most drawn-out public execution in European history. The victim was tied face up to a large wooden wheel. The executioner took a heavy iron hammer and began. One bone at a time. Arms first, then legs, then the ribs, then the spine. Each break was slow and deliberate. There was no rush. After every major bone had been shattered, the broken limbs were woven through the spokes of the wheel, bent into shapes the human body was never designed to make. Then the wheel was hoisted onto a tall pole in the center of the town square. Alive, in public, on display. Birds landed and began to feed on exposed flesh while the victim was still breathing. Death took hours, sometimes days. The executioner was sometimes ordered to end it with a final blow to the chest. Other times, they were ordered to let the suffering continue as long as the body could hold on. Used across France and Germany from the Middle Ages through the 1800s. Centuries of this. Number 1. The Brazen Bull. This is it. This is the one that people still struggle to believe was real. Around 570 BCE, a craftsman named Perillus of Athens approached a Sicilian tyrant named Phalaris with a proposition. He had designed something extraordinary, a life-sized bronze statue of a bull, completely hollow on the inside, with a door in the side. The concept was simple. Place a person inside, seal the door, and light a fire underneath. But what Perillus had added, what made this device not just an execution machine but something far, far darker, was a system of pipes and tubes inside the bull's head. Engineered so that the screams of the person burning alive inside would travel through the tubes and emerge from the bull's mouth sounding like the bellow of an actual animal. The smoke from the burning body drifted from the nostrils like incense. Phalaris liked the idea. He asked Perillus to climb inside and demonstrate how the sound system worked. Perillus stepped in. Phalaris sealed the door and lit the fire. The man who built the brazen bull became its very first victim. Phalaris used the bull for years, throwing enemies, traitors, and anyone who displeased him into its bronze belly. But history has a dark sense of justice. When the people of Acragas finally overthrew Phalaris in 554 BCE, they dragged him to his own device, shoved him inside, and lit the fire one final time. The brazen bull wasn't just a killing machine. It was a machine specifically designed to turn human suffering into theater, to take the worst thing happening to one person and transform it into entertainment for the crowd. That is why it sits at number 1. That is why, thousands of years later, we still can't look away